When did you face the elephant in the room? I was 8 years old, sat cross-legged on my living room floor, my eyes peeled to the television in a trance, as if someone had used tape to force them open. I was perplexed. In front of me, images of fires raging in the Amazon flashed across the screen. In that moment, my gut was sent crashing through the floor as I realized no one was talking about this massive issue. I was terrified. And the more I seemed to worry, the more of an inconvenience I seemed to become to the people around me. You see, I come from a place tormented by a great green disconnect. Don't get me wrong, Copenhagen is a beautiful, beautiful city, filled with some of the happiest people in the world. But like in much of the West, there's a growing feeling of apathy and anxiety towards the climate crisis that we either ignore or are completely consumed by. At 8 years old, I found that most of the people around me seemed to have been disconnected. It was not their problem, not their burden, and definitely not their responsibility to come up with a solution. There's this stunning silence. And yet when you ask people, most are completely and utterly terrified. So what did I do? Well, at 8 years old, I convinced a friend to collect cash donations for NGOs replenishing the Amazon. And despite us being young, having no association with any of these NGOs, and our neighbors having their serious suspicions we would spend all their money on candy, we managed to collect $150. We had made a difference. Now, I don't say this because I necessarily want your recognition. I say this because the only solution to apathy and anxiety is action. But how do you take authentic action in a world where greenwashing is poised to become the biggest corporate issue of the next decade? Just as we've begun to realize we can no longer procrastinate action, a new problem has formed, one of trust. For the past decade, companies and their CEOs have been neglecting and dismissing our planet using climate buzzwords in their marketing, but not as key values in their business models. They know they need to be seen to care, so many companies have turned to carbon offsets as a solution for reaching sustainable targets. And the same is true for people. There's just one problem. In an eternal pissing contest of buyers who want cheap ways of making big claims and suppliers constantly competing on pricing and profit margins, we have allowed the trust of carbon markets to be compromised by greed. Recently, Vera, the world's largest carbon certifier, was accused of selling phantom credits, meaning that carbon offsets were worthless, and their CEO had to resign as a result. Clearly, the only way to get around the stigma of greenwashing that has hampered the voluntary carbon markets is to work with authentic eco-warriors, driven by the right reasons, not by big profits. I want you all to take a second to imagine your favorite animal. Really picture it. No matter what that animal is, it's 100% guaranteed that my favorite animal is way, way cooler than any of yours. My favorite animal is the strongest animal in the world, capable of lifting 1,141 times its own weight. My favorite animal is underestimated, it's underappreciated, but it's tenacious and relentless. It is, of course, the dung beetle. He thought that was very funny. Small-scale, smallholder, authentic eco-warriors are like dung beetles, already doing good things for the right reasons, but 99% of them are completely ignored. They're underestimated, they're underappreciated, but they are tenacious and they are relentless. Existing verification systems in carbon markets make it literally impossible for dung beetles to participate, costing upwards of $150,000 to get certified. In Indonesia, we have more than 40 million farmers living for less than $4 a day. Despite representing perhaps the biggest green potential out there, the economics of carbon offsets have made this group of people financially unattractive. So, when I first started out on my war on greenwashing, I quickly realized that the most efficient and perhaps only way to tackle it would be to start a company and do it myself. So, I founded Dungbeetle with the mission of connecting good money with small-scale, authentic carbon projects. And, backed by Luke Jansen, exited founder of 300-person mobile tech company, Tiger Spike, blockchain CTO, Cesari, and Rebecca, co-founder of Beta Carbon, I became sort of like a young Formula One driver, bashing around at high speeds, but guided by a team with plenty of domain expertise that knew exactly what direction to point me in. Now, when I first came to green school in 2020 after somehow convincing my parents to quit their jobs and move their business across the world, as you do, I realized that true Dungbeetlery is all over our community at Green School. We work with small-scale organizations led by entrepreneurs who are prepared to push shit uphill to fight climate change, shifting the end beneficiary of carbon markets from being a C-suite in Singapore to a local Indonesian farmer. Rather than hire expensive consultants, we use measurable IoT metadata sent to us live from eco-projects to verify their existence and constantly monitor their impact. These data sensors, combined with carbon calculations that are published and updated, much like software, makes us more transparent than pretty much any other company in the industry. Now, those farmers that I was telling you about literally just 1 minute ago, well, Shoko, a company led by globally recognized Japanese eco-scientist Takashi, has developed Indonesia's first truly small-scale biodigester. We install these biodigesters with local farmers like Kumang, living in rural Bali and Indonesia. Our biodigester turns Kumang's cow manure into biogas and organic fertilizers, pure green gold, providing Kumang with a sustainable alternative to relying on fossil fuel gas, firewood, and chemical fertilizers. In fact, after installing our biodigester, Kumang now saves upwards of $32 a month and is less at risk of respiratory diseases. And using a live flow meter to track each of our biodigesters individually, we know that the average unit sequesters around 1 ton of carbon a year, that our investors can claim as offsets along with co-benefits, such as reducing the use of chemical fertilizers. And although consultants have tried to convince us that their estimates are somehow more accurate than our real-time data, industry CEOs, large companies, green school parents, and Oxford-educated scientists seem to think otherwise. This is a quote from Renat, CEO of billion-dollar carbon certifier, South Pole, who thinks our approach to certifying small-scale carbon projects is filling a much-needed market gap. We really want you to build a relationship with your climate action, interact with it, and talk about it. We use low-impact blockchain technology to issue project certificates in the form of NFTs, prioritizing transparency and community over anything else. We collect project metadata, such as the biodigester flow meter, and we build beautiful, beautiful dashboards, such as this one. The data you see comes from a biodigester that Jonathan, green school parent and biophilic architect, bought for $550 to offset his travel. With precision and accuracy, Jonathan can now track the usage of his biodigester by the local farmer. And not just that, Jonathan can stay informed about his carbon offset on a monthly basis. The precise location of his eco-project and the variety of co-benefits it brings to the community, the farmer, and the environment. What I quickly realized, though, was I wasn't just trying to help local farmers. I was getting a crash course in being the CEO of a tech-enabled climate startup. But we only had 4 people in the company, and I was the only one who was full-time. Well, full-time along with being a student, of course. And so when I wasn't skipping community sports to attend sales meetings or calling people out for greenwashing on LinkedIn, I had to do most of the heavy lifting. I had to become a programmer. When I realized we had an opportunity to build a dynamic tracking tool, such as the one you just saw, with all of the data we had on hand, I taught myself to code in a multitude of languages. And learning to code requires your mind to work in warped ways. It's sort of like learning a language with a different alphabet. And so I used that to build a dynamic metadata dashboard working across a number of IoT devices and APIs to pull dynamic metadata. Okay, Freddy, we all get it. No one understands what the hell I'm talking about. And that's cool. Neither did I 8 months ago. All you really need to understand and know is that our data and our ability to individually track it makes greenwashing a whole lot easier to avoid. I was sales. I stomped around Bali in my Dungbeetle t-shirt and thrifted jeans, looking for companies, resorts, and restaurants. I spoke to anyone I possibly could. I spent countless hours looking for phone numbers and email addresses, LinkedIn and Twitter accounts. I cold called more people than I could possibly know. And almost every single person I seemed to contact returned my call. You see, being a young green change maker turned out to be a sales advantage. You know, Luke likes to say that I have no idea how difficult sales actually are because of this advantage. But really, Luke, that is just an excuse for the fact that I sell way more than you do. But in all truth, our product sells itself. It really does. In fact, since December, our total sales figure has reached far beyond ₹500 million. That's billion with a B, in case you weren't aware. Recently, we sold a ton of indigenous Miyawaki forest to Bulgaria on behalf of one of our eco-project partners, Junglo. And Junglo's forests are amazing. They grow 10 times as fast, 30 times as dense, and 100 times as biodiverse as traditional reforestation. In fact, we actually recently planted an indigenous Miyawaki forest on Green School campus, along young and curious Green School students. And when those students stand on this very stage in 15 years, those trees will be over 20 meters tall. But even more important and powerful than the war we are waging on greenwashing are the stories of the people and communities we help. So, of course, I had to become the head of marketing and PR. I was featured on a number of outlets, such as CBC, Fuji TV, and Tech in Asia, and had a number of articles and podcasts made without spending any company money. And not spending any company money was great, because we were bootstrapping, which really just means we were broke. But in the end, not having any PR budget didn't really matter, because people will tell good stories for free. And so we were featured on platforms with a collective 53.4 million independent monthly viewers. During these past 10 months, since Dungbeetle got incorporated, I have learned more than the last 10 years of being in school. One moment, we're incorporating a company in Singapore. The next, we're launching the world's first NFT of a real-world duck. My startup journey has taken me on some truly epic adventures, from pitching for funding in Singapore to some of the world's biggest firms, including Sequoia, to installing biodigesters along local farmers in rural West Bali. You know, I thought being a teenager was going to be a disadvantage going to this. After all, I'm just some kid from some bamboo school somewhere in Bali, and for someone to invest in a company named and inspired after a fishes-eating insect seemed sort of unlikely. But now, a climate-focused impact VC has decided to do just that. Now, this slide is titled Startup Turbulence because not every aspect of being in a startup is pitching for funding. Landing a new sweet deal, onboarding the next eco-project partner, or launching that next new exciting product. A large part of being in the trenches of a startup is fighting. Fighting for survival, fighting imposter syndrome, and fighting not to let your life out of balance. As a kid, I would often lose this balance. I want to end today with a page taken out of my mom's journal almost like a decade ago, written about the fears of 8-year-old me, and it goes something like this. Tucking Freddie into bed. Yet another frightened conversation about whether there'll be a world to grow up in. What can we do? And do our efforts even matter? Why aren't the adults doing anything? I feel like I'm holding up a mirror deflecting every worry. You'll be fine, honey, stop crying. But who am I even kidding? Do I just wish you would give up like the rest of us? Forget all about it and make the best of now, knowing the crisis is looming just around the corner. But can we do anything? Are we willing? Will we take responsibility? Standing here a decade later, I am quite confident that we can change our heading. But time is running out, no matter how much of a cliche that may be. You see, if we want to reach net zero by 2050, we need to not double, not quadruple, but octuple authentic green investments. The catch is that 2050 is actually 20 years too late. Dungbeetles may be underestimated. They may be underappreciated. They may be small and seemingly insignificant. But you empower a Dungbeetle, you get shit rolling. Thank you. Now, if you are someone who wants to take some action and join the Dungbeetlery, you can. You can scan this QR code or one of the QR codes around the Suncap, and I look very much forward to speaking to all of you when all of these guys have presented their amazing presentations. Thank you so much.